Hello folks, this is Steve Brule with Studio Brule, and I'm here with my, of course, patriarchal cigar, my patriarchal hat, and the official drink of the patriarchy, Scotch on Ice. And I hope you just joined us for the premiere of No Joke Janice episode 27, which was social, I'll get this out, social worker tweets hatred of men. And with me to talk about her newest episode is, of course, Janice Fiamengo.
Hello
Hi,
there,
Janice.
Steve. How are you doing?
Great, thanks.
That's good.
How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Wasn't that an awful thing to be tweeting from a social worker? Isn't that amazing?
It is quite amazing. Yeah. I never run out of things to continue to be astounded by. In this case, there were a number of things that were quite striking about that tweet. I think the date of the tweet was January the 24th, 2020. And, it got 190,000 or so likes. The number fluctuates every time I look at it. But, it was very, very popular. She really hit the Twitter jackpot with that one. And obviously there was some negative response as well as the hugely positive response that caused all those likes. But a lot of the negative response was fairly mild. A lot of people, it was just so striking trying to reason with her. One person said, I think a young man, but just judging from his handle, said, "Why would you hate me? I bet if we met at a social event with friends, we might have pleasant conversations and laughs, but that's not possible when you say you hate me." It just seemed to be so sad, that somebody would sort of say, "Well, gee, I'd really like to like you, and I bet we could be friends. But, why do you say these kinds of things?" And another person wrote back, someone calling himself Joe Public wrote back, "It's comedy. Punching up is always acceptable. If men are upset and want these comments to stop, they need to work to bring about equality. Then it would be unacceptable to say." I thought, oh, that's just perfect, isn't it? So he's saying,
insane.
Yeah, he's saying it right there. So
Yeah,
somehow the fact that it is socially acceptable, and of course, as we know, sanctioned and encouraged, not just barely acceptable, but somehow this notion that it is acceptable for women to hate men proves that women are punching up, and therefore the onus falls on men not only to ignore the hate, but to redouble their efforts to work for women's issues and to become allies to feminists. That's quite something. So you have to not only accept being hated and not be angry about that, but use it as an excuse to become an even more ardent supporter of feminist policies to disadvantage men. Wow, that's quite something.
That guy seems like a, what do we call them? There's not a bunch of words. There's white knights, there's simps, there's all kind of stuff like
something.
that.
I mean, maybe that person was even a woman, who knows? But I was surprised by, of course, there were some angry responses and a lot of guys saying, actually, I don't really care. That's the thing about being a guy. I'm happy to be a man, and I don't really care whether some women hate me or not. But it was striking, the mildness of the majority of responses and the gleeful, malicious approval that many chimed in with as well.
Here's a comment from Access 2084 here, and I can't agree more with this. The social services and psychology included, all of these humanities have been dominated by feminism for 20 to 40 years now. They are run by hate-filled feminists, and any sane person who even stands up mildly in class to this group of hateful feminists will be shunned, beat down, chased off campus, pretty much. So yeah, I agree. Men should not seek out social services. You should not seek out psychologists in
No.
the official psychology world. Look for people like Paul Elam and Tom Golden.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for somebody close to you, maybe Tom or Paul Elam can refer you to. Maybe they have some contacts across the country or around the world. I don't know, but don't go to these people. They are poison.
Well, that's, that is the worrisome thing. And for a long time, we've known that all of the humanities, all of the social sciences, now more and more the natural sciences, the physical sciences, have all been infiltrated by intersectional feminism. And for a while, I think the idea was, it's let them have the university. The university is not the real world. When they get out into the real world, these crazy ideologies will come into contact with reality and will be shattered. They'll have to adjust to the demands of their workplace. They'll have to adjust to the real people that they're dealing with. But that's not what happens. What happens is that you have people working in social work and in many other fields, including medicine and the law and journalism. And as you said, psychology, counseling psychology, for example, who really do hold these beliefs. Or at least say that they do. I don't know what's really in this person's mind, but and it can't help. I mean, one assumes that can't help but influence how this person would deal with a vulnerable man if she comes into contact with him, which I assume she will in her work.
And these people in social work and psychology, they inform the courts. They also they become expert witnesses. Mm-hmm. And in my case, we dealt with Child Protective Services when my son's mother was hitting him, and the police investigated and found that she was doing exactly what I had complained about. The Child Protective Services put me under the grill, and the police said it was not in the best interest of the child to arrest the mother. That was the bottom line. There's no such thing. This best interest of the child thing is absolute nonsense. It is best interest of the mother that they actually follow. Mm-hmm. But that's a little aside there. I don't trust anybody who's been through. Relevant. Yeah, I don't trust anybody. Any of these people who have been through the humanities and come out into these so-called helping professions. They're not out there to help men. They're out there to enforce their ideology of hatred on the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe the social sciences are even worse, and that the oppressor.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say necessarily speak outside of sociology and psychology are the two big ones I was really referring to.
Yeah, sociology and psychology for sure, and it is really worrisome to think of vulnerable men coming into contact with this person, and it's sad to think that she would probably have been Christina Agbebyi would probably, if she hadn't had the education that she had, might well have escaped this kind of sanctioned hatred. This I think is the first time in the history of the world. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe during Nazi Germany, the universities were under the control of Nazis, and maybe this is true of many regimes actually. But certainly the idea that education educates one out of bigotry into a wider view of the world. That used to be a reasonable assumption when I was growing up and went to university. Certainly that was the idea, that your mind was broadened by learning about people from different cultures and learning a wide variety of things and realizing how little you actually knew and how your standpoint closed you off to all sorts of perspectives that were valuable in trying to arrive at truth. And that's no longer the case. You have all of these professions and these professional degrees that have been completely given over to this hateful ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And even if we can keep some element of education, the value of education for broadening the mind in our universities, it's still not enough. Because if you look at the example of China, for instance, the captains or the leaders of the political party control everything. So when you go into a research department, it's not someone through your research department that leads that research department. It is a representative of the Communist Political Party, a captain or a sergeant or somebody in the party. And I worked with several people from China, and they described the horrors of that. And it's very, yeah.
Yeah.
But
well,
anyways, we've gone along.
Yeah, I know somebody who left Australia actually, and is working in astrophysics in China, and he says it's actually better there. That although there is Communist Party domination of the academy, it's far less rigid and far less punitive than it is in Australia or in North American universities and colleges. So yeah, it's a really scary situation. And I did write to, as I mentioned in the video, I wrote to the president of the National Association of Social Workers and asked her whether her association stood by this award that they gave to Christina Egbebii, and how it could be that she wouldn't be a danger to men that she would come into contact with. And I never heard anything back. The only response, I think, was that a web page that announced the award, the Student of the Year award that was given to Egbebii, was taken down. And within a day of my writing. Yeah, that was
well, that's interesting. Maybe it's early to judge them on not responding, because these institutions can be horribly slow in their investigations. But here's a question from Delilah. Delilah despised. So, when will it start turning around? I'm going to say, don't hold your breath.
Don't hold your breath, Delilah. Hi, Delilah.
This machine is this machine is still picking up steam, and there's a powerful number of people behind it and a lot of money behind it. Feminism, in my view, Canada is a lost cause, at least for men, but it can go on for a long time economically successful because of the fact that the system really enslaves men, and very few men can get their heads above water long enough to think about escaping the prison that Canada has become.
Yeah.
So,
and these, certainly, if we're just talking about the universities, I suspect they will go on for quite some time too. They're getting huge infusions of cash from their governments that we're all paying for, of course. And these diversity initiatives, feminist initiatives are hugely supported by national governments. And so they're going to be able to continue pumping out warriors for social justice ideology for many years to come. Most people really have no idea how far the rot has gone, and how much so many students have become foot soldiers of hatred.
And I'll give you an example from my personal experience of some friends. And I want to refer to this, start with this comment, 20 years until it runs out. I think that's excessively optimistic. In 1984, when the president of Dow Chemical came to all around the Dow Chemical world giving talks about the introduction of affirmative action, and people were asking questions saying, you mean you're going to hire and promote women ahead of men just because they're women? And they said, yes. And most of us thought, okay, these corporate programs don't last very long. Maybe at the outside 2 to 5 years and it'll be all over.
Yeah.
That was 35 years ago, 36 years ago, and it's not slowed down.
No, if anything, there are more and more calls for this kind of thing. Absolutely, yeah.
And I just want to say one other thing on this same topic. There's, oh crap, no, this was important. Yes, I know 2 guys who were very successful businessmen, and in both cases their wives took them to the cleaner, destroyed them in court, caused no end of misery for them with their children, and both guys rebuilt their lives, rebuilt themselves to financially successful, and they won't talk about their problem before. One guy then went on to be destroyed a second time by a second wife, and he still won't participate in revealing the problem to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He won't talk about it. He won't complain about feminism. He won't complain about the court. He won't complain and tell the story of how his ex-wife destroyed him. Mm-hmm. So this is the thing. This is one of the problems with why this problem is going to go on for a very long time. is that the vast majority of men will put their noses to the grindstone even harder as a result of being destroyed or having rocks thrown on their back by hate-filled people. They're not going to stand up and fight back against a feminist system. They're going to put their heads down and work even harder. And that's why the system will persist for a very, very, very long time.
Even to come back to the tweet in particular, a lot of men chimed in and said, "I'm a man and I hate men too." And,
Yep.
a lot.
Yeah. Men are extraordinarily reluctant to stand up to women. And it shows itself most clearly in this never hit a woman sort of concept in our culture. And the vast, overwhelming majority of men would not hit a woman even if she's beating them up with a baseball bat. They won't fight back. And I've seen videos of this online. And I think this spills over into an attitude that just don't even argue back, don't complain, don't complain even justly about female behavior. And that's got to end. That has got to end. Men have to start saying no to unreasonable female requests, particularly from feminist groups, and start fighting back.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, and willing to say that this is unacceptable. It's simply unacceptable behavior. Yeah.
Exactly.
But what we get, I was just thinking, this reminded me when I was thinking about a social worker who would proudly declare that she hates men, and that it's not a game. It reminded me of a researcher who published some research. This is out of the University of Wilfrid Laurier, the same university that caused Lindsay Shepherd all of the trouble that she endured. And this is somebody in the criminology department, but obviously quite intimately related to social work, who did a study of homeless men. And her research was published about a year and a half ago. And she had a whole chapter in which she talked about the idea of male hegemony and male privilege, arguing that although homeless men in some way did not have access to the ordinary privileges of men, like having a home and having a job and the power that comes with that, but still their identities were deeply implicated in ideas of male power and privilege. And so she actually, at the end of this chapter, makes recommendation that people working with homeless men, one of the things that people working with homeless men should stress is the need for these men to examine their privilege and to recognize what male hegemony looks like and all the various forms it takes, and how it's even it's even in some way directing their thoughts about themselves and their identities. It was it was lunacy, and the utter lack of empathy from this privileged feminist academic in writing about homeless men. And she had interacted with all sorts of men and learned about their lives, learned about how they had suffered abuse as children, and the addictions and the alcoholism and the horror of their lives, and the abject powerlessness that many of these men experienced on a day-to-day basis, and yet could still instruct that one of the things they needed to deal with was their male privilege.
It's incredible. There seems to be absolutely no compassion anywhere in the hearts, minds, or souls of these feminist women.
Well, and the thing is, I was thinking about this because the experience of reading through Christina Agbebi, she's got two Twitter accounts. One is the one where she calls herself Kay at Shea Butter Femme, and the other is her professional account. I spent a lot of hours reading through both of those Twitter accounts, and it's a weird experience because a lot of her tweets are, they're interesting. I don't agree with a lot of her far left ideas, but she's interested, for example, in incarceration as a problem in the United States, and the huge number of people. I mean, obviously it's primarily men, she knows that, who are incarcerated. And she is primarily interested, of course, in women and in keeping women out of prison, but she's not utterly unaware of the many Black men in particular who are also incarcerated in the United States. And, so a lot of these were things I thought like she would actually have things in common with a lot of men's rights advocates. And I bet if I met her, there'd be things I'd want to talk to her about. A lot of her tweets were quite human and, empathetic and nice. So how can it be that somebody would tweet that kind of statement of hatred and be pleased with it and leave it to
Janice.
stand? And all I could come up with is that although everybody struggles with hatred, I think, of different sorts, individual or group-based hatreds, but in her case, she's given herself permission, and she's been given permission by everything in her professional milieu and everything in her educational background. And that is really staggering.
Yeah, and people criticize me sometimes for drawing comparisons to Nazis with feminism, but if you had spoken to a lot of Nazis in the height of Nazi power, you would find a lot of pleasant, agreeable things in their conversations. Mm-hmm. It's not like even the staunch Nazis were always spewing hatred. No, mm-hmm. But they did spew hatred, and their hatred was very damaging and destructive and mm-hmm. evil.
Yeah.
And the same goes with feminism. So there's going to be feminists out there that you probably have a good time with if you stayed off the topic of feminism mm-hmm. and patriarchy. But the reality is, they have an overriding, abiding hatred of men, and it has been, like you said, is a very powerful point. They have been told that it's legitimate and socially acceptable.
Well, and even morally necessary.
Morally necessary. Like the Nazis. The Nazis were all told that doing this to the Jews was morally necessary as well, hey?
Yeah.
And the same thing with racism in the U.S. and other parts of the world. I wanted to highlight, David Monroe made a couple of comments on brotherhood and male spaces as a place to start, and I have to really, truly agree with this. Feminists have been encroaching on and invading male spaces every single place they see them. And here is why I think this is important, is that when a group of men are together, there is a different kind of mentality, a different way of interacting. And as soon as one woman, if there's a group of 15 men, one woman enters that, the dynamic changes entirely, because men then start to instinctively perform for the attention of the woman. They start to perform along the sort of sexual competition lines, along a lot of different lines, and you can see the behavior change within seconds whether a woman walks into an all-male group. And I've had a couple of experiences with all-male groups in my life, and I tell you, they were 100% supportive, positive, and they are entirely different character of interaction than mixed groups. So I'd say, and I'm trying to start a male group here to get together once a week here in the Dominican Republic. And we had one meeting, and it was only 3 of us, and it was kind of impromptu. So I don't know if it'll take off or not, but I think it's really important that men get together as men to the exclusion of women.
Yeah, absolutely. I tweeted something just the other day that I thought was really interesting, and this was a case of, now, where was it? Of course, I'm going to forget. I think it was in Oklahoma City, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was a guy who has started an all-men's barber shop. And his idea is that it's not just a place for cutting hair, but it is going to be like a man cave or a man space where men can just say whatever they want, and they don't have to worry about being inappropriate, offending a woman, having a woman overhear something that might be a bit crude or whatever. And it made news not because of that idea of having a men's only space, but because a woman came in with her husband, and she was told that not only would they not cut her hair, but that she couldn't sit there while she waited for her husband. So of course she was outraged, and she complained about it, and I guess she went to the press. I'm not sure how it became a story, but and she was quoted saying this is completely unjust. She didn't expect them to cut their hair, but she certainly expected she should be able to sit in there, and this was exclusionary, etc. And but the guy, and I don't know, what the upshot will be, whether maybe there's any kind of legal action she can take against the man. I hope not. He's maintaining that it's very important that it remain a male-only space. So I was like, more power to him.
I agree. And for those guys, I mean, this is a simple thing that that you could start up with a few friends. I talked about this on one of my coffee break sessions, which, by the way, I started up about 10 days ago, and we had 5 of them this week. They have a modest viewership, but I hope it takes off. It's very casual for anybody who wants to join us. So far it's been about 1:30 in the afternoon Eastern time. And I just go over a bunch of things that come across my desk in the last week. But for those guys who can't leave the country, which is my favorite response here, I think we do have to just... My philosophy that I came to probably too late in life was that don't stay where you're not wanted and appreciated. Whether it's at a job, in a relationship, in your family, in anywhere, in your country. And I don't feel that old white men are wanted or appreciated in Canada. So I feel that if you can do it, leave Canada and go to one of these places like the Dominican Republic or Thailand or any place where you think you might be happy. But don't think that those places are going to be perfect, because I have to say right off the bat, the Dominican Republic is not perfect, but it's better than Canada.
Yeah, I'll never forget your saying that for you, Canada came to seem like a very, very wealthy, clean, well-maintained prison.
Safe prison, work prison for men. Yeah, that's exactly what Canada has become. It is a clean, safe work prison for men.
Yeah, and when you see the amount of sanctioned hatred or contempt, the idea that men are disposable, or that men are simply to serve women, that a man's main purpose is to worry about women's issues and to put his own identity, his own needs, his own desires last, when you see that widely touted as the only acceptable ideology, it's hard to argue against your point of view.
I just want to respond to Kevin here. Kevin Bacon did nothing wrong. Okay, Kevin. I'm not sure what he's referring to there exactly. Some scandal with Kevin Bacon, I suppose. But I think Kevin is referring to live stream the men's group. But I don't. If that's what you're referring to, Kevin, I don't want to do that for one reason. It's for the same reason that I think men shouldn't. You should put your phones aside in these groups, because it brings in somebody into this conversation who's not really there. So it kind of destroys the integrity of the group conversation. I think the point of a men's group together is for men to be talking to the present men there, getting to know them, having these, building those relationships with people who are there. So I don't even like it when somebody picks up their phone, starts texting back to somebody that's there. They're no longer present when they do that. So that's just my thought on that. So I would be reluctant to live stream or record these kinds of men's group meetings, but I do encourage men to do it.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I agree too. I think it's a great idea.
And it's as simple as, say, a few guys going every Saturday morning, say at 10 o'clock for coffee at the local coffee shop. And don't have any expectations of it. Just the whole thing is that we're getting together, we're talking, it's a group of men. Have a coffee, have a beer. I don't know what it is you're going to want to do. But
my dad did that late in life. He started this coffee group, and he was a very committed member of it for years in his 80s, and loved it.
I agree. And I dated, I think I talked about it at the coffee break time. I am live streaming the coffee breaks, by the way. If that's what you're referring to, then that's fine. But I dated this Italian girl years ago, and the 6 Italian families came over from Italy after World War II, and they all built houses. They built one another's houses, by the way, by hand, only as they had money. Anyways, these 6 men would get together every Saturday, or is it after church on Sunday? I can't remember. But they'd go to a coffee shop, and that was it. There was no agenda to it. It's just 6 guys maintaining their relationship, keeping in touch with each other, and talking as men. No wives allowed, no wives there. They just sat around with their coffee. And you see it in a lot of European countries.
You
and
do.
You see it,
Yeah.
I saw it in Colombia, and I have some photos. I think I put it on one of my Instagram things. There's all men groups gathering together, and there's all men surrounded a chess table or several chess tables, and it's men with men who obviously seem to know each other. They do this every weekend or whatever, and they're all involved, and they're talking, and they're getting together, and it's just men together.
Or they're playing bocce ball, or you see it in Greece, you see it in Croatia, you see it in Italy. It is a thing. Yeah.
It's an important thing, and you know something.
Super
I encourage women to get together. Nobody ever stops women from getting together as women. You know?
Absolutely, sure.
But there's something, a growing sense of it's wrong for men to get together in the absence of female supervision, and that's what it is. Make no mistake, it is female supervision that makes these feminists want to intrude on male spaces and male events.
Yeah, and you see it in the growing attention that's being paid to online men's groups, and the idea that all of these groups are somehow toxic, that they're all leading to, that they're the gateway to violence, to horrific misogynistic groups that intend to terrorize women. And of course, that's not true at all. That the men have a perfect right to get together online and discuss their issues. But I agree with you that it's really good to have those things in person. Even more important. Yeah.
I was going to try and find a link to support what you're saying, because it was an article that came out, a group of MIT, a study out of MIT. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's a study. We talked about it on Regarding Men. I think you just posted it.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and that was a frustrating thing, because I there was an article in this MIT magazine, and it was based on a study that a whole bunch of researchers at various universities collaborating had done together, claiming that the manosphere, as they called it, is becoming more and more toxic. And they used some sort of tool, some sort of Google tool that analyzes the language that's used and gives it a toxicity score. It's really not clear at all that the tool has any capacity to actually be able to, reasonably assess what it considers to be toxic. And Tom Golden had looked into the tool and what it, its limitations. It had found that, even someone signing his name, Love Dick, at the end of a message, that was considered to be toxic, because the tool could not distinguish between somebody whose nickname is Dick, or whose short form of his name is Dick, and a dick that you might be calling somebody that in a rude way,
in just a fun way.
In a fun way, indeed, exactly. I mean, it can't read context; it can just read words. And so, but the point of the study was clearly to find that every single type of men's issues group, or even things that aren't men's issues, they lump together: incels, pickup artists, men's rights advocates, and what was the fourth? I'm forgetting. Oh, MGTOW.
MGTOW, yeah.
Yeah, and they describe all of them in these, incredibly negative ways, claiming that all blame women, all are full of hatred, all are seething with anger and just ready to lash out. And the clear intention is to smear every single group of men that wants to either form an identity apart from women, or is in the case of pickup artists, trying to figure out how to interact with women in a way that's going to be successful with women, or just wants to discuss men's issues, or whatever it happens to be, to smear them all as potentially violent and deserving of scrutiny, even by Homeland Security. They're all potentially terrorist groups, according to these researchers. It's just it's horrible. And the clear, it wasn't made explicit in the study, but the clear agenda is to send the message that all of these groups should be banned and that there should be very careful state scrutiny
Yeah.
of everything men say online in all male forums or in anti-feminist forums. So it's a really scary development.
It's terrible. This is exactly Nazi Germany style stuff ramping up here, and that's
And
why I
meanwhile,
can. That,
sorry.
That's why I continually tell people, just get out. Get out. At the very least, this stuff, even if you aren't caught up in the worst of it, the message is getting in, and you will start to hate yourself. You're going to develop this kind of slave mentality where you believe you deserve to be a slave.
Yeah, either
Get
that
out.
or an utterly paranoid rage, which is actually quite understandable and well grounded, because at the same time you have all of these, how many men do we have to kill and why can't we hate men, and the end of men, and men are disposable and the future is female and everything else, and the Christina Agbebis of the world, masters of social work, saying hating men is a commitment and it's a way of life and you're supposed to take that and that's acceptable. Twitter never removed that. She was not banned. Karen Strawn, I think, was banned for life from Twitter for calling someone or using the word retard. And yet Christina Agbebi can tweet that statement of hatred and nothing happens. I know it was reported. The double standards just blow your mind. And I don't know how a young man, or any man for that matter, is supposed to put up with that day after day, year after year. It really does induce a kind of self-hatred or a rage.
Absolutely. And I want to make one more point about the MIT study, and this is very, very, very significant to me. This is a study, this is an app or a program or algorithm that they scour the web with, and why did they not apply it to feminist sites? Why is it only applied to men's sites? If this study was going to have any relationship to human dynamics of hatred and anger and all the rest of this stuff, or gender, then they would have to apply it to all the groups. They would have to design the study, have a study design such that it accounted for these different parameters, but they didn't even try. No. And they weren't even criticized for not trying. They weren't even criticized in the media for just targeting right in on what is already a socially vilified group. They targeted in directly on a group that is already being hated, that's already been targeted, and they left all the other groups out of it.
I know.
What about all the other groups? Why not go after the LGBTQ community? Look at feminists. Look at other identifiable groups. Where is the hatred in there? And I'll guarantee you, just off the top of my head, that those groups are off the charts. They'd have to write a different algorithm to capture all the hatred.
They would, absolutely. I mean, the hypocrisy of it. And of course, it goes through and it talks about the various grievances that these various groups talk about, as if they are just fantasies. It says that men's rights groups talk about the injustices of the family courts. And, they claim
Isn't that horrible?
Family courts are biased against men. Ha, ha, ha. Where'd they get that idea? And
ask any honest lawyer if you can find one.
If it were if it were LGBT talking about grievances, wouldn't there be an interest in whether those grievances were legitimate or not, and whether anything could be done to ameliorate their sense of outrage over whatever, social sanctions or social inequalities they were complaining about? But that's never mentioned in either the study itself or the report. So it's just crazy making. You take a group, you subject them to all sorts of inequalities, double standards, injustices, a constant barrage of hatred. Then you tell that group that they can't even talk about their grievances without being further demonized and vilified as a potential terrorist threat. It's
unbelievable.
If you wanted to create terrorists out of a group of people, that would be exactly the way you would go about doing it.
Yep. I wanted to highlight this comment by Hubris Not. We are good people, most of us men. Absolutely. I'm going to qualify, I'll even say,
most men
in my opinion, not just good, great.
Great.
Men are sacrificing their lives and their very health by working like dogs day and night throughout their lives until by the time most men retire, their health is shot. Their health is shot by helping to support and build this culture.
Yeah.
And yet all along the way, they're attacked and vilified, and they still put their nose to the grindstone and build and support this culture.
Yeah.
Men are great.
Yeah,
Not
they
just
absolutely
good.
are. Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers to all you guys out there, and I hope you all can escape prison one day.
Maybe we should end it there. That's a good note to end on. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I do have a few other things to say, but I'll save it for some of my coffee breaks sessions, which will be continuing on for the foreseeable future, and I hope more of you can join us. It'll be, the next one I think will be at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which is, help me with this, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
It is, yeah. 3 hours.
And I think it's 6:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, or whatever they call it now. Is it still GMT?
Yeah, it is. It's GMT. Yeah, it's 8 hours ahead of the Pacific Time.
And we'll leave it on this note. Luke Chass says, we need more Janice. Hear, hear. Right on.
More Steve, too.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the vote of confidence. So, folks, that's all we have for today. And we'll see you again next week. We'll have another live stream with Janice. And in the meantime, if you're looking to hang out for some casual conversation about things that come across my desk day by day, join us for a coffee break.
And look forward to your comments on this video, too.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Good night.